The stadium lights were so bright they turned the night into day. And for a moment, standing there with that badge around my neck, I almost forgot the empty seat with my parents' names on it just a few hours earlier. My name is Emily Carter, I'm 22 years old, and on the day I graduated college, my parents chose the Super Bowl over me. Not a work emergency. Not a flight delay. A game. I remember standing on that stage in my navy cap and gown, the fabric itching against my neck, the dean mispronouncing the last name before mine, the crowd clapping in waves that felt distant, like I was underwater. I scanned the stands anyway. Section B, row 12, seats 7 and 8. Still empty. I checked my phone one last time even though I already knew. 4:12 p.m. No new messages. The last text from my dad read, "Game starts early. We'll celebrate later." Later. That word had followed me my entire life. Later we'll come to your science fair. Later we'll watch your presentation. Later we'll make it up to you. But later never came. Ashley, my older sister, never had to wait for later. When she had a dance recital, my parents drove 6 hours and booked a hotel. When she made varsity cheer, they threw a backyard party with 50 guests and a catered buffet. When I got into college on a full academic scholarship, my dad looked up from the TV and said, "That's good, Em," before turning back to the game. It wasn't cruelty. Not the loud kind. It was something quieter. Being overlooked. Being optional. Being the child they didn't have to try for. I told myself for years that if I just worked harder, if I made myself impossible to ignore, they'd finally see me. So I did everything right. Straight A's. 2 part-time jobs. Internships. No complaints. No trouble. I built my life like a resume line by line, hoping one day it would be enough to earn their attention. And for a moment I thought graduation would be that moment. I even called them the night before. I remember sitting on the edge of my bed, staring at the confirmation email for the ceremony, asking, "You'll be there, right?" My mom laughed lightly like I was asking something obvious. "Of course, sweetheart." My dad chimed in from the background, something about traffic and timing, but I didn't question it. I wanted to believe them. That morning I woke up early, ironed my gown and placed 2 extra tickets on the kitchen counter, just in case they forgot theirs. I shouldn't have been surprised when they didn't show. I shouldn't have felt that hollow drop in my chest when I walked across the stage and heard applause from strangers instead of my own family. But I did. And the worst part wasn't even the silence. It was realizing that somewhere, in a crowded sports bar or packed living room, they were cheering, just not for me. After the ceremony, people hugged their families, took photos, laughed, cried. I stood there for a second longer than I should have, holding my diploma, pretending I was waiting for someone. That's when I felt the edge of the badge in my pocket. The one I hadn't told them about. The one that came with a single line in the email. All access credential. Super Bowl operations team. 1 ticket. 1 entry point into a world they chose over me. I didn't realize then that that badge would change everything. But I did know one thing as I walked away from that empty seat and into the parking lot. The sound of distant cheers echoing from somewhere far away. If they chose the game over me, then maybe it was time I stepped into their world, not as the girl they ignored, but as someone they couldn't look past anymore. I did not go home after the ceremony. I did not stop for dinner or answer the few polite congratulations texts that came in from classmates. I sat in my car in the parking lot for exactly 9 minutes, hands still gripping the steering wheel, staring at the dashboard clock as if time might reverse itself and give me a different ending to the day. It did not. 5:03 p.m. Kickoff was less than 30 minutes away. I could almost hear it already, the roar of a stadium full of people who showed up for something that mattered to them. I reached into my bag and pulled out the badge again, turning it over between my fingers. It was heavier than it looked. Solid plastic with a holographic strip that caught the light. My name printed clearly underneath a bold line that read, "All access. Not guest. Not spectator. Staff." I had earned this. Months of early mornings, late nights, coordinating logistics for events that most people only saw for a few hours on television. I had learned how to move behind the scenes, how to make something massive look effortless. And still, somehow I had never told them. Maybe part of me had been saving it, waiting for the right moment when they would finally look at me and see something worth paying attention to. But sitting there in that car, diploma on the passenger seat, silence filling every inch of space, I realized something I had avoided for years. There was no right moment. There was no version of me that would suddenly become enough for them. The realization did not come like a dramatic shift. It came quietly, like something settling into place. I picked up my phone and opened our family group chat. The last message was from Ashley, sent an hour earlier. A photo of her at a watch party, red jersey, arms raised, surrounded by friends. Caption: best night ever. My mother had replied with a string of heart emojis. My father had typed, what a game already. No one had asked how my graduation went. I stared at the screen for a second longer, then locked it and set it face down. That was the moment something inside me changed. Not anger, not even sadness, just clarity. I started the engine and pulled out of the lot, merging onto the highway as the sky began to darken, headlights stretching in long lines ahead of me. The stadium was 42 miles away. Normally, traffic on a night like this would be impossible, but I knew the back routes. I knew the timing, the staff entrances, the checkpoints. I had helped plan them. As I drove, I replayed every small moment that had led here. Every time I told myself to be patient. Every time I accepted less. Every time I said it was not a big deal. But it was. It had always been a big deal. By the time I saw the stadium lights rise above the horizon, glowing against the dark sky like something unreal, my chest felt lighter than it had all day. I was not going there to prove anything to them. At least that is what I told myself. I was going. Because for once I was choosing something for me. I parked in the designated staff lot, flashed my badge at the security gate, and watched the guard wave me through without a second glance. Inside, everything moved with precision. Headsets, clipboards, people walking with purpose. I slipped into that rhythm like I belonged there because I did. And for the first time that day, I did not feel invisible. But what I did not know yet, what I could not have known as I stepped through those doors and into the noise and light and energy of that place, was that before the night was over, the same people who left my seat empty would be looking up at a screen, searching for me in a crowd where I was no longer the one being overlooked. I stepped deeper into the stadium, the noise building with every step until it felt like it lived inside my chest, vibrating through my ribs, a constant reminder that this was where everyone wanted to be tonight. Screens the size of billboards flashed highlights, logos, faces of players larger than life, and everywhere I looked there were people moving with urgency, purpose, belonging. I clipped my badge to my jacket and walked past security checkpoints that would have stopped anyone else, each scanner lighting green as I passed through. No hesitation. No questions. Just access. It was a strange feeling walking into a place my parents chose over me, but doing it on my own terms, not as a fan trying to get in, but as someone who already belonged behind the scenes. I checked my phone out of habit. 6:02 p.m. The game had started. No new messages. I did not expect any. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and kept walking. My assignment was on the operations side, coordinating movement between media zones and field access, making sure everything ran on schedule. It was not glamorous, but it was important. Every second mattered here. Every detail. And for the first time that day, my mind was not on the empty seats or the silence. It was focused, sharp, steady. I moved through corridors lined with cables and equipment, past staff calling out updates into headsets, screens tracking every angle of the game, every shift in momentum. I had trained for this. I knew where to stand, when to move, who to talk to. I knew how to make myself seen in a way that mattered. Not for attention, for value. That was the difference. At one point, I paused near a monitor showing the live broadcast. The camera panned across the crowd, thousands of faces packed together, all cheering, all part of something bigger than themselves. And for a brief second, a thought crossed my mind. They are out there somewhere. My parents, probably standing shoulder to shoulder with strangers, yelling at a screen, celebrating every play like it was the most important moment of their lives. I wondered if they had even thought about me after that text. If there had been a moment, even a second, where they realized what they missed. I pushed the thought away. It did not matter anymore. Or at least I was trying to believe that it did not. A voice came through my earpiece calling my name sharp and clear. Emily, we need you at Gate C. Media access just shifted. I responded immediately, moving without hesitation, weaving through the controlled chaos with practiced ease. As I reached the gate, a small group of media personnel were waiting, credentials raised, tension in their posture as they watched the clock. I stepped in, checked passes, coordinated entry, kept everything moving. Smooth, efficient, invisible to most but essential to everything. One of the supervisors, a man I had only spoken to twice before, nodded at me as I finished. Good work, Emily. Stay close. We might need you for something bigger later. Something bigger. The words lingered longer than they should have. I nodded, trying to keep my expression neutral, but something in my chest shifted again. Not the hollow feeling from earlier, but something else. Anticipation. I glanced back at the massive screen overhead as the crowd erupted again, the energy rising like a wave. Somewhere out there they were part of that noise. But what they did not know, what they could not see from their seats or their screens or their perfect view of the game, was that just a few levels down behind all of it I was moving closer to something that would pull me out of the background. Completely. And I did not realize it yet, but before the night was over, the same screen they were watching so closely would show them exactly who I had become. I stayed close, like he said, moving just behind the main flow of operations, watching, listening, waiting for the moment when I would be needed again. And for the first time in a long time, I was not trying to prove myself to anyone, I was simply doing the work, and that changed everything about how it felt to be there. The game moved into the second quarter, the energy rising and falling in waves that you could feel even behind the walls, the kind of sound that traveled through concrete and steel, a reminder that out there tens of thousands of people were reacting in real time to something they cared about. I checked the time again. 7:18 p.m. I imagined my parents somewhere in that crowd, probably standing now, probably shouting, my dad with his arms raised, my mom smiling beside him, completely present in a moment they chose. I wondered briefly what it would feel like if they had chosen me like that just once. Not perfectly. Not every time. Just once. The thought came and went, and I did not chase it. Another call came through my earpiece, sharper this time, more urgent. Emily, we need a runner to assist with the halftime coordination, VIP access, media crossover. Confirm availability. I did not hesitate. Confirmed, I said, already moving before the response came back. Copy that. Report to level 3, access corridor D. Immediately. My pace quickened as I moved through a different part of the stadium now. One that most people never saw. Narrower hallways, tighter security, staff moving faster, conversations shorter, everything more controlled. This was where the bigger moments were prepared before they ever reached the screen. As I turned the corner into corridor D, I saw a cluster of higher-level staff, people in tailored jackets, lanyards with different color codes, the kind that signaled authority without needing to say a word. A woman with a headset and a tablet glanced up as I approached. You are Emily Carter. It was not a question. Yes, ma'am. Good. We are short one coordinator for VIP escort. During halftime. You will assist. Stay precise. No mistakes. Understood. She handed me a folder, thin but organized, with names, timing, entry points. I scanned it quickly, my mind already mapping the movements, the sequence, the flow. This was bigger. Not just logistics. Visibility. If something went wrong here, people would notice. If it went right, no one would see it, but everything would feel seamless. I stepped into position near the access point, watching as security prepared the area, adjusting barriers, checking credentials, everything timed to the second. My heartbeat was steady, not rushed, not nervous, just focused. And then, as the first group began to approach, escorted by security, dressed in tailored coats and team colors, I caught something that made me pause for half a second longer than I should have. A familiar laugh. I turned my head slightly, just enough to see without drawing attention. And there they were. Not on a screen. Not imagined. My parents. My father standing a few feet back from the barrier, looking exactly the way I remembered when he was excited, shoulders forward, eyes locked on the field beyond, completely absorbed. My mother beside him, scanning the area, smiling, her attention moving from one thing to the next. They were closer than I ever expected them to be. Close enough that if I stepped forward, if I said their names, they would hear me instantly. But they were not looking at me. They were not looking anywhere near me. To them, I was still exactly where I had always been. Out of frame. I turned back to the task in front of me, tightening my grip on the folder just slightly, grounding myself in the moment. Names. Timing. Movement. That was what mattered. Not this. Not them. Not anymore. But as the halftime countdown began and the energy shifted again, building towards something bigger. I felt it, that same quiet shift inside me from earlier, but stronger now. Because this time I was not standing in an empty seat waiting to be seen. I was standing at the edge of something that was about to put me exactly where they could not ignore me anymore, whether they wanted to or not. I kept my eyes on the list in front of me, not on them, not on the way my father leaned forward like the world existed only on the other side of that barrier, not on the way my mother adjusted her jacket and smiled at something happening 50 yards away that felt more important to her than anything else that had happened that day, including me. Names. Timing. Movement. That was what I repeated in my head as the halftime countdown clock ticked closer, each second tightening the air around us. The headset crackled again. 30 seconds. Prepare for transition. Copy, I said, my voice steady, even though my heartbeat had shifted just slightly, not from nerves, but from the awareness that everything was aligning in a way I had not planned but somehow felt inevitable. The first VIP group moved through, escorted precisely on cue, their passes checked, their path cleared. I stepped forward, guiding them through the designated route, pointing, directing, making sure there was no hesitation, no confusion. It was smooth, controlled, invisible work that made everything else look effortless. As I turned back to the barrier for the next group, I caught it again. My name. Not spoken loudly, not called out to me, but mentioned casually like a passing thought. Emily. Did you hear something about Emily today? It was my mother's voice. Soft. Distracted. My father responded without looking away from the field. She had that graduation thing, right? We will call her later. Later. The same word. The same pattern. I felt it land, but it did not hit the way it used to. It did not break anything. Confirmed something. I stepped forward as the next group approached, my focus locking back into place, my posture straight, my movements precise. One of the supervisors glanced at me again, this time with a longer look as if reassessing. Stay with me after this group, she said quietly. We may need you on stage coordination. On stage. The words echoed differently this time. Not background. Not behind the scenes. Visible. I nodded once. Understood. The final seconds of the second quarter disappeared, and the stadium shifted in a way that was almost physical, like the entire structure inhaled at once. Lights adjusted. Music surged. The halftime transition began. I moved with the flow, stepping into a new position closer to the field access point, where everything was faster, louder, more exposed. Staff ran coordinated routes, equipment rolled in, performers prepared just out of sight, all of it happening in a controlled rush that looked like chaos from the outside but felt like precision from within. And then, without warning, the woman with the tablet turned to me again. Emily, you are up. You will assist with stage entry timing and coordinate one of the featured segments. Stay visible. Follow my cues. Do not miss your mark. My mark. I repeated it once in my head as I stepped forward, crossing a line I had not expected to cross tonight, moving from the edges into a space where there was no hiding. The lights were brighter here, the sound louder, the awareness sharper. I could feel the presence of the crowd even if I could not see every face. But I knew where they were. And I knew that somewhere in that sea of people, my parents were watching the same stage I was about to step onto. I positioned myself where I was instructed, headset secure, eyes on the cues, every part of me focused on the sequence that was about to unfold. This was not about them. This was about the work. That is what I told myself. But as the music surged and the first part of the performance began, as cameras shifted and screens lit up across the entire stadium, I understood something I had not fully accepted until that moment. There was no separating the two anymore. Because in just a few seconds, when the cameras moved the way they were scheduled to, when the screen cut to the segment I was now part of, the line between invisible and seen would disappear completely. And this time there would be no empty seat, no missed moment, no later. Because this time, whether they were ready or not, they were about to see me. The music hit first, a deep pulse that rolled through the stadium like a wave, and then everything accelerated at once, lights sweeping across the field, cameras shifting into position, performers moving into formation, and I was standing exactly where I had been told to be, headset pressed to my ear, eyes locked on the cues in front of me. Stay on mark. Wait for signal. Move on green. The instructions repeated in my head as clearly as if someone was saying them out loud. I could feel the heat of the stage lights now, brighter than anything in the stands, sharper, more focused, like a spotlight that did not care who you were, only whether you were ready. I adjusted my stance slightly, grounding myself, feeling the solid surface beneath my feet, the controlled chaos moving around me, everything running on timing so precise it left no room for hesitation. "Emily, stand by." The voice in my earpiece was calm but firm. I inhaled once, steady, controlled. "Stand by," I confirmed. The first segment of the halftime show surged forward, music rising, the crowd responding instantly, a wall of sound that filled every inch of space. From where I stood, I could not see every face, but I could feel them, thousands of reactions blending into one constant force. And somewhere in that force, my parents were watching. Not me. Not yet. Just the show. Just the spectacle they chose over everything else. Move. I stepped forward exactly on cue, crossing into a zone that moments earlier had been empty, now alive with motion and light. My role was clear. Coordinate the transition. Keep the timing exact. Make sure the next segment hit without delay. I moved quickly but without rushing, signaling to the crew, aligning positions, checking that every element was where it needed to be. This was what I had trained for. Not attention. Not recognition. Execution. And yet, as I took my position near the edge of the main platform, I became aware of something else. The cameras. Not just one. Multiple angles. Close range. Wide sweep. The kind that did not just capture the performance but everything around it. The headset crackled again. "Emily, hold position. You are in frame for the transition shot." In frame. The words landed differently than anything else that night. Not behind the scenes. Not hidden. Visible. I did not react outwardly. I did not shift or hesitate. I held my position exactly as instructed, eyes forward, posture steady, every movement controlled. The music hit a transition point, lights shifting again, and I saw it out of the corner of my eye. The main screen. Massive. Impossible to ignore. The feed switched, cutting from the wide crowd shot to a tighter angle, one that moved across the stage, capturing the energy, the movement, the coordination. And for a brief second it paused. On me. Not long. Not dramatic. Just enough. Enough for anyone watching to see my face clearly, my badge, my position, my presence in a place that was not supposed to include me in their version of the story. The crowd did not react to me specifically. They reacted to the show, the moment, the energy. But I knew what that shot meant. I knew who would see it. Because somewhere in that stadium, or maybe watching from a screen just a few feet away, my parents were looking at that same image. And for the first time, I was not the one missing from the moment. I was in the center of it. The shot moved on, the performance continued, everything flowing forward as if nothing had happened. But something had. I felt it, not as a rush, not as excitement, but as a quiet shift that settled deeper than anything before. Because I did not need them to react. I did not need them to stand up, to call my name, to suddenly understand. The moment had already happened. They had already seen. And there was no taking that back. The voice in my earpiece came again, pulling me back into the next sequence. Good positioning. Stay with it. We are not done yet. Not done. I focused forward again, moving into the next cue, the next transition, the next precise movement that kept everything running. But in the back of my mind, one thought stayed clear, steady, undeniable. That moment, that single frame on that massive screen, had already changed the way this night would end, and what came next would make sure they never looked at me the same way again. The shot moved on, but I did not move with it, at least not right away, because something had shifted in a way I could not ignore anymore, not in the noise, not in the lights, but in me. I stayed exactly where I was for the next cue, eyes forward, hands steady, listening to the instructions coming through. My headset, but part of my mind was somewhere else, replaying that single moment when the camera paused and the screen filled with my face. It had not been dramatic. It had not been announced. But it had been real. And real was enough. "Emily, reset position for segment 3. I heard the instruction clearly and stepped back into motion, crossing behind a line of performers as the next transition began, everything still moving at a pace that left no room for hesitation. I adjusted equipment placement, confirmed timing with another coordinator, nodded once when a signal came through. Everything was still running smoothly, perfectly even. But now there was a new awareness layered underneath it all. Because somewhere in this stadium, my parents had seen me in a place they never expected me to be. And I knew them well enough to understand what that meant. Confusion first. Then disbelief. Then the slow realization that the version of me they had held onto for years did not match what they had just seen. The headset crackled again, pulling me back into the present. Emily, after this segment, report to VIP corridor. There may be follow-up coordination needed. VIP corridor. The same area where I had seen them earlier. I felt the words settle for a second before I responded. Copy that. I moved through the final transition of the halftime sequence, guiding one last group into position, checking timing, making sure nothing slipped. The music reached its peak, the crowd responded, and then just as quickly as it had begun, the halftime show started to wind down, energy shifting again, preparing for the return to the game. As the final notes faded and the field began to clear, I stepped back, my role in that moment complete, and turned toward the corridor I had been assigned to. The walk there felt different this time. Not heavier. Not lighter. Just clearer. Each step measured, each movement intentional. I passed through the same access points as before, the same security checks, the same staff moving with purpose, but now there was a sense of inevitability that had not been there earlier. When I reached the VIP corridor, the atmosphere was quieter but more focused. Conversations lower, movements more controlled. And then I saw them again. This time they were not looking at the field. They were not laughing or cheering. They were looking around, searching. My mother was the first to notice me. Her expression shifted almost instantly, from casual distraction to something sharper, more alert, as if her mind was trying to catch up to what her eyes were seeing. My father followed her gaze a second later, his posture changing, shoulders pulling back slightly, eyes narrowing just enough to show that he was processing something he did not expect. I did not stop walking. I did not rush either. I moved at the same steady pace I had maintained all night, badge visible, headset still in place, my focus forward even as I felt their attention lock onto me completely. Emily? My name came from my mother this time, not loud, but clear enough to cut through the controlled quiet of the corridor. I paused then just long enough to acknowledge the moment, turning slightly to face them. For a second no one said anything. The distance between us was not far. 10 feet, maybe 12. Close enough to speak. Close enough to close. But it felt larger than that. Because everything that had built over years, every missed moment, every empty seat, every later that never came was standing there in that space between us. You are here? My father asked, his voice carrying a mix of confusion and something else he was trying not to show. I looked at him, then at my mother, taking in the expressions I had spent years trying to earn and now did not need anymore. I am working, I said, my voice calm, even exactly the way I had spoken into my headset all night. There was a pause after that, longer this time, heavier. My mother glanced at my badge, at the headset, at the controlled environment around us, as if trying to piece together how I fit into it. We did not know, she started, but the sentence did not finish. Because for the first time it did not matter whether they knew or not. I shifted my weight slightly, preparing to move again, to return to the work that had brought me here in the first place. But as I turned, as I stepped forward to continue down the corridor, I heard my father say something that made me stop for just half a second longer. Wait. And in that moment I realized this was the first time in years that they were the ones trying to catch up to me, not the other way around. I stopped, but only for a moment, just long enough to acknowledge that word, wait, hanging in the air between us like something unfamiliar, because it was. They had never needed to say it before. I was always the one waiting. Waiting for them to show up. Waiting for them to notice. Waiting for them to choose me. And now, for the first time, they were the ones asking me not to walk away. I turned slightly, not fully facing them, just enough to show I heard. My father took a step forward, closing the distance by a foot, maybe two, his expression still trying to settle into something that made sense of what he was seeing. You are working here? He asked again, as if repeating the question might change the answer. Yes, I said, keeping my voice steady, neutral, the same tone I had used all night with supervisors and staff who expected clarity, not explanation. My mother looked at my badge again, this time longer, reading the details, her eyes moving from my name to the access level, then back to my face. All access, she said quietly, almost to herself. There was something in her voice I had never heard before. Not pride. Not exactly. But recognition. and maybe a little uncertainty. When did this happen? She asked, looking back at me, as if trying to place a version of me that did not fit into the timeline she had been paying attention to. I could have answered that question 100 different ways. I could have explained the internship, the long hours, the early mornings, the nights I stayed up coordinating schedules and learning systems they never asked about. I could have told them how long I had been building something they never noticed. But standing there, in that corridor, with the noise of the stadium just beyond the walls and the weight of years between us, I realized something. They were not asking because they had missed it. They were asking because they were just now seeing it. And that was not the same thing. Has been a while, I said simply. My father let out a small breath, not quite a laugh, not quite anything else, as he glanced briefly toward the field, then back at me. You should have told us, he said, the words coming out like a reflex, like something he was used to saying when he felt out of the loop. I held his gaze for a second longer than I normally would have in the past, not challenging, not defensive, just present. I did, I said. The sentence landed quietly, but it stayed there, between us, undeniable. My mother's expression shifted again, her brows drawing together slightly as if she was replaying something in her mind, searching for a memory that had not seemed important at the time but suddenly was. My father looked like he was about to say something else, but the moment stretched just long enough for the weight of what I had said to settle, because I had told them. In small ways. In passing conversations. In moments they brushed off with a nod or a distracted response. They just had not been listening. The headset in my ear crackled again, sharp, pulling me back into the present. Emily, we need you back at field access, immediate coordination required. I lifted a hand slightly, signaling that I had heard, my attention shifting back to where it needed to be. I have to go, I said, the words simple, not apologetic, not hesitant. My father stepped forward another half step, as if trying to hold on to the moment a little longer. We can talk after, he said quickly. After the game. Later. There it was again. That word. Familiar. Predictable. I paused just long enough to meet his eyes one more time, not with expectation this time, but with something else. Distance. Maybe clarity. Maybe both. I have work to do, I said instead, and then I turned, stepping away before they could say anything else, before the moment could shift back into something it had always been. As I walked down the corridor, the sound of the stadium growing louder again, I felt it clearly now, not as a question, not as something I needed to figure out, but as something I already understood. They were seeing me now. Finally. But they were still asking me to fit into their timing. There. Later. And for the first time in my life, I was not going to wait for that. I moved fast this time, not because I was rushing, but because everything inside me was aligned in a way it had never been before, each step clear, each decision already made. The noise of the stadium rising again as I pushed through the access doors and back toward the field, the energy sharper now as the second half of the game was about to begin. Emily, where are you? The voice in my headset cut through immediately. Approaching field access, I replied, steady, controlled. Good, we have a last-minute adjustment. You are needed at broadcast coordination, camera sweep alignment. Get there now. Broadcast coordination. That was different. That was not just operations. That was visibility. I changed direction without hesitation, moving through a narrower corridor that led closer to the main production zone, where the screens, feeds, and camera teams controlled what millions of people would see. The air felt different here, tighter, more focused, conversations clipped and precise, eyes locked on monitors that displayed every angle of the game in real time. I stepped into position as instructed, a senior coordinator handing me a headset extension and pointing toward a marked zone near one of the main camera rigs. You will assist with live sweep timing. Follow cues exactly, no delay. Understood, I said, already syncing with the rhythm of the team, watching the screens, learning the flow within seconds. This was what I had trained for without even realizing it. Adapting fast. Staying invisible until it mattered. And now it mattered. The game resumed, the crowd exploding back into motion, the field alive again with movement and sound, and above it all the cameras began their wide sweeps, capturing not just the action, but the experience, the people, the moments that made the night feel bigger than a game. I tracked the timing carefully, listening for cues, adjusting positions, making sure each transition landed exactly where it needed to. And then halfway through a sweep something shifted. Camera 3, hold shift angle, include production edge. The voice came through sharply. Include. Production edge. That meant the shot would widen, pulling in not just the field, not just the crowd, but the space where we stood. Where I stood. I did not move. I did not react. I held position exactly as instructed, every instinct telling me that this was not the moment to step back, not the moment to disappear. The camera moved. The screen changed. And just like before, for a brief second that felt longer than it was, I was there again. Clearer this time. Not a passing frame. Not an accidental capture. A deliberate angle that showed the coordination, the control, the person making sure everything stayed in sync. Me. I did not need to look up at the massive screen to know it was happening. I could feel it in the shift of the monitors around me, in the subtle glance of someone nearby, in the way the moment held just slightly longer than before. And somewhere in the stands, or maybe even closer than that, my parents were seeing it again, not as a mistake, not as something they could ignore, but as a pattern they could not deny. The headset crackled again, pulling me back in. Good hold, stay on it, next cue in 5. I nodded, even though no one could see it, my focus snapping back to the task, the next movement, the next precise adjustment. But something had changed again, deeper this time. Because now it was not just that they had seen me. It was that they were being shown over and over, in a space they respected, in a moment they valued, that I was not where they left me. I was somewhere else entirely. And as I continued to work, moving with the rhythm of the game, the cameras, the coordination, I understood something with complete clarity. This was no longer about proving anything. It was about presence. And presence, once seen, could not be undone. But what I did not know yet, what I could not have predicted as the game pushed forward and the night unfolded, was that the next moment would not come from a screen or a camera. It would come directly face to face, in a way neither of us were prepared for. I felt it before I saw them, that shift in the air that happens when attention locks onto you in a way that is no longer accidental, no longer distant, something closer, more immediate. And as I adjusted my position near the broadcast rig, eyes still on the monitors, hands steady on the timing cues, I heard it again, my name, but this time closer, sharper, not filtered through memory or assumption. Emily. I turned slightly, just enough to confirm what I already knew. And there they were, closer than before, inside a space they were not supposed to be in, guided by someone with a different level of access, someone who had let them cross a line most people never crossed. My father looked different now, not in appearance but in focus, like the game had finally taken a step back in his mind and something else had taken its place. My mother stood just behind him, her eyes moving quickly, taking in the screens, the staff, the environment, and then settling back on me, trying to understand how I fit into all of it. How did you get back here? I asked, not harsh, not accusing, just direct, because this space required clarity. A man beside them, wearing a higher level credential, spoke before either of them could answer. They are with a VIP group, he said, nodding toward my parents, his tone casual, as if that explained everything. Did not, but it explained enough. I nodded once, acknowledging, then shifted my attention back to the monitors because the game had not stopped, the timing had not paused, and neither could I. Emily, stay on cue, we are moving to replay sequence, the voice in my headset cut through, and I responded immediately, copy, adjusting my stance, tracking the next transition. My father stepped closer, just enough to be within direct conversation range, his voice lower now, controlled, like he was trying to match the environment around him. We saw you on the screen, he said, and there was something in his tone I had never heard before. Not dismissal. Not indifference. Something closer to realization. I did not look at him right away. I kept my eyes on the monitors, following the sequence, making sure nothing slipped, because that was my responsibility, and I was not going to break that for a conversation that had waited years to happen. I am working, I said again, the same words as before, but they landed differently now because this time he had context. My mother stepped slightly to the side, trying to catch my eye, her expression softer now, uncertain in a way I had never seen from her. We did not know it was like this, she said, her voice quieter, almost careful. I let a second pass, then another before responding, because timing mattered here, not just in work but in words. It is always like this, I said, still not turning fully toward them, letting the statement sit in the space between us. Always. Not just tonight. Not just this moment. The headset crackled again, sharper this time. Emily, confirm alignment, we are going live in 3. Confirmed, I replied instantly, stepping forward half a step, adjusting the angle of a monitor, signaling to the camera operator beside me. 3, 2, 1. The feed shifted, the replay sequence rolling out exactly as planned, smooth, seamless, invisible to the millions watching. That was the goal. That was the standard. And I met it. When the sequence locked in and the timing held, I stepped back slightly, just enough to allow the next operator to move in, my role in that moment complete. I turned then, fully this time, facing my parents directly, not as the daughter waiting for approval, but as someone standing in her own space on her own terms. For a second, no one spoke. The noise of the stadium filled the gap, the screens flashing highlights, the game continuing without pause. My father looked at me, really looked this time, as if trying to reconcile the version of me he had carried for years with the one standing in front of him now. "We missed your graduation," he said finally, the words simple, but heavier than anything else he had said all night. I held his gaze, not looking away, not softening it, just holding it. "Yes," I said. "You did." And for the first time there was no follow-up from me, no attempt to make it easier, no explanation, no excuse. Just the truth, clear and complete. My mother glanced down for a second, then back up, her expression shifting again, something like regret passing through it, but not fully formed, not yet understood. We're going to call you," she added quickly, as if that might still matter. Later. The word did not need to be said. It was already there. I let a small breath out, not heavy, not dramatic, just enough to release something that had been sitting there for a long time. "I am busy now," I said, not cold, not distant, just factual, the same tone I had used all night, because that was what this moment required. And as I turned back toward the monitors, toward the work, toward the place I had built for myself without them, I understood something completely, something that no screen, no camera, no moment could change. They had finally seen me, but they were still arriving late. And this time I was not waiting for them to catch up. I turned back to the monitors, letting the rhythm of the work pull me forward again, because that was the only place where things made sense, where timing was clear, where effort led to outcome, where nothing depended on whether someone decided to show up or not. The game moved into the third quarter, faster now, more intense, every play carrying more weight, and the production team adjusted with it. Camera angles shifting, replays tightening, every second accounted for. I slipped back into that flow completely, my focus narrowing to cues, signals, transitions, each movement precise, each response immediate. "Emily, we are adjusting to sideline coverage, prepare for shift," the voice in my headset said, and I responded without hesitation, already moving into position, already anticipating what would be needed next. Behind me I could feel them still there. Not speaking now. Not interrupting. Just watching. And that was new. They had never watched me like this before. Not when I stayed up late studying. Not when I worked double shifts. Not when I told them about internships or opportunities they brushed past. But now, in a place they valued, in a moment they understood, they were watching. I did not turn around. I did not acknowledge it. Because this was not a performance for them. This was my work. And it deserved my full attention. The headset crackled again, sharper this time. "Emily, we need confirmation on camera for alignment now." "Confirmed," I said, stepping forward, checking the angle, adjusting slightly, signaling to the operator. "Good. Hold that." The response came back immediately. I stepped back into position, my movements smooth, practiced, unforced. This was what I had built. Not overnight. Not by accident. Piece by piece, in moments no one saw, in hours no one asked about, in efforts that did not get applause or recognition. And now it was all here, visible, undeniable. A pause came between plays, a brief break in the intensity, and in that small window I felt it again, their attention, closer this time, more focused. My mother's voice came softly from behind me. "Emily." There was hesitation in it, uncertainty, like she was stepping into a space she did not know how to navigate. I did not turn right away. I let the moment sit, just long enough to remind myself that I did not have to respond immediately anymore. That I was not obligated to fill the silence. When I did turn, it was controlled, calm, the same way I had handled everything else tonight. "Yes," I said. She looked at me for a second, searching for something, maybe the version of me she was used to, the one who would soften, who would make it easier, who would close the gap for them. But that version was not standing here anymore. "We did not realize," she began, her words slower now, more deliberate, like she was choosing them carefully. "We did not understand how important this was to you." I held her gaze, steady, not confrontational, just clear. "It was not just this," I said. The sentence was simple, but it carried everything behind it. Not just tonight. Not just the game. Not just the graduation. All of it. The years. The patterns. The choices." My father shifted slightly beside her, his posture less certain than before, his usual confidence replaced by something quieter, something that looked like he was finally listening instead of assuming. "We should have been there," he said, and this time there was no excuse attached to it, no explanation, no justification. Just the statement. I let it sit for a second, then another, not rushing to respond, not filling the space the way I used to. "Yes," I said again. "You should have." The words were not harsh. They did not need to be. They were enough on their own. The headset cut in again, pulling me back to where I needed to be. "Emily, prepare for final quarter transition, we are tightening coverage." "Copy that," I replied immediately, turning back toward the monitors because the work was still moving, the game still unfolding, and I was part of that flow. As I stepped forward, aligning myself with the next sequence, I understood something fully, something that no conversation, no apology, no realization could undo. They were here now. They were seeing me now. But this moment, this place, this version of me did not exist because they showed up. It existed because I did. And as the final quarter approached, as the energy in the stadium built toward its peak, I knew that whatever happened next, whatever they said or did or tried to fix, would not change the one thing that mattered most. I was no longer waiting to be chosen. I had already chosen myself. The stadium felt different as the fourth quarter began, not louder, not brighter, but sharper, like every second now carried weight, like every movement mattered more. And I felt it in the way the team around me tightened their focus, in the way the calls in my headset became more precise, more urgent, more exact. "Emily, we are compressing timelines, stay ready for rapid transitions," the voice said, and I responded instantly, already shifting into position, already anticipating what would come next. This was the part of the night where mistakes showed, where pressure exposed hesitation, where everything either held together or started to slip. And I did not slip. I moved with it, adjusting, confirming, executing, every action clean, every response immediate. The crowd's energy surged with every play, rising and falling in waves that you could feel through the ground, through the structure, through your own body, and above it all the screens kept moving, capturing every angle, every reaction, every moment that defined the game. I stayed locked into my role, but I was aware of them still, just behind me, no longer speaking, no longer trying to interrupt, just watching in a way that felt unfamiliar, like they were seeing something they had missed for too long, and did not know how to approach now that it was in front of them. A major play unfolded on the field, the crowd erupting instantly, the sound hitting like a wall, and the production team reacted in sync, cameras shifting, replays lining up, angles adjusting in real time. "Emily, confirm replay sequence alignment now." "Confirmed," I said, stepping forward, checking the feed, signaling to the operator, making a small adjustment that kept everything seamless. "Good hold," came the response. "Stay sharp." I stepped back again, my focus still forward, but the moment lingered, not because of the play, not because of the crowd, but because of what had changed inside me. For years, I had imagined a moment like this differently. I thought if they ever really saw me, if they ever realized what I was capable of, it would feel like something clicking into place, like something finally being fixed. But standing here, in the middle of everything I had built, I understood that was never going to happen. Because nothing had been missing from me. The missing part had been them. And now that they were here, now that they were seeing it, it did not change what I had already become without them. My mother's voice came again, quieter this time, almost careful, like she was trying not to disrupt something she now understood was important. "Emily, we are proud of you." The words landed, and for a second, everything slowed just enough for me to feel them fully. Proud. It was a word I had waited for longer than I could remember, a word I had built entire versions of myself trying to earn. And now, hearing it here in this moment, it felt different than I expected. Not overwhelming. Not emotional. Just late. I turned slightly, just enough to meet her eyes again, and I saw it there, something real this time, something she had not shown before, but it came after everything else, after the missed moments, after the empty seat, after the years of not seeing. "Thank you," I said, my voice calm, even not rejecting it but not holding on to it either. Because I did not need it the way I once did. My father shifted beside her, his voice lower, more grounded than before. "We want to make this right," he said. "We can celebrate, do something for you, anything you want." The offer hung there, familiar in its shape, but different in its timing. Later. After. Make up for it. I looked at him for a second, not with anger, not with frustration, just with clarity. "There is nothing to make up," I said, and the words came easily because they were true. The moment had already passed. The choice had already been made. And so had mine. The headset cut in again, sharp, immediate. Emily, final sequence, all positions lock, we are closing out. Copy that, I replied, turning back fully, stepping into the final alignment, my focus narrowing one last time as the game pushed toward its conclusion. The crowd rose again, louder than before, the energy peaking, everything building toward the final moments, and I moved with it, every step precise, every action controlled, everything holding together exactly as it should. And as the final sequence unfolded, as the screens captured the closing moments of the game, as the stadium filled with the sound of a night reaching its end, I understood something completely. This was the moment I had been building toward. Not for them, not for anyone else, but for myself. And no matter what they said now, no matter what they realized or tried to change, this version of me, standing here steady, capable, seen, had been created long before they ever decided to look. But what I did not realize yet, what I could not see as the final seconds ticked down and the night began to settle, was that the last decision of this night would not be about the game or the work or even them. It would be about what I chose to do next when everything finally went quiet. The final whistle did not come with silence, it came with a surge, a final explosion of sound that rolled through the stadium like a closing wave, the kind that marked the end of something big, something complete. And as the crowd rose to their feet, as lights shifted and screens filled with highlights and reactions, I stood exactly where I had been placed, headset still in my ear, hand steady, eyes on the last sequence as it locked into place. Emily, confirm final alignment, the voice came through, and I responded without hesitation, confirmed, everything clean, everything held together, exactly as it should. Good work, came the reply, and just like that it was done. The pressure eased, not all at once but gradually, like something unwinding after being held tight for hours, and for the first time that night I allowed myself to take a full breath, to step back half a step, to let the moment settle around me. People began to move differently now. Less urgent, more reflective, conversations starting, laughter returning, the controlled intensity shifting into something lighter, something finished. I removed my headset slowly, the weight of it leaving with a quiet click, and for a second I just stood there, not moving, not rushing to the next thing because there was no next thing. Not here. Not tonight. I turned then, knowing they would still be there, and they were. My parents had not left. They stood a few feet away, not speaking, not interrupting, just watching in a way that felt different from before, not curious, not confused, but aware. My father's posture had changed, less certain, more grounded, like he was no longer trying to understand what he was seeing, but accepting it. My mother's expression was softer, quieter, her eyes steady on me, not searching anymore, just present. For a moment none of us spoke. The noise of the stadium filled the space, people celebrating, staff wrapping up, the night continuing around us, but between us it was still. You did all of this, my father said finally, his voice low, not questioning, not doubting, just stating something he now understood. I met his gaze, steady, not needing to explain, not needing to expand on it. Yes, I said. My mother took a small step forward, her hands clasped lightly in front of her, like she was holding on to something she did not want to lose. We missed a lot, she said, and this time the words did not feel like something being offered to fix the moment, they felt like something being acknowledged for what it was. I let the silence sit for a second before responding, because this was not a moment to rush. Yes, I said again. You did. There was no anger in it. No edge. Just truth. My father exhaled slowly, his eyes shifting briefly to the field, then back to me. We want to be part of this, he said, and the sentence was simple, but it carried something new, something that had not been there before. Not control. Not assumption. A request. I held his gaze, considering it, not quickly, not reactively, but with the same clarity that had carried me through the entire night. Being part of this did not mean stepping into what I had built and reshaping it to fit them. It meant something else entirely. It means showing up, I said, my voice calm, even the same tone I had used all night, but this time the words were not instructions, they were boundaries. Not later. Not after. When it matters. My mother nodded slowly, as if the words were settling into place, as if she understood that this was not something she could answer with a promise, but with action. We can do that, she said quietly. My father did not speak right away, but when he did, his voice carried something steadier than before. We will, he said. I watched them for a second longer, not looking for certainty, not expecting proof, just observing the way I had learned to observe everything else that night. Then I nodded once, not as agreement, not as forgiveness, but as acknowledgement. The stadium lights still burned bright above us, the crowd still loud, the night still alive, but something inside me had already settled. I had walked into this place alone, carrying years of being overlooked, of waiting, of trying to earn something that was never given. And I was leaving it different. Not because they had finally seen me, but because I had finally stopped needing them to. I turned then, not away from them but forward, stepping back into the flow of people moving out of the stadium, my path clear, my steps steady. Behind me they followed, not leading, not pulling me back, just there at a distance that felt right for the first time. And as I walked out into the night, the lights fading behind me, the noise settling into memory, I understood something that no moment, no screen, no recognition could ever take away. I was never the one who needed to be chosen. I was the one who chose. And everything changed because